When you hear the word appeasement today, it's pretty much an insult, right? It makes you think of weakness, of giving in, of failing to stand up to a bully. But what if I told you that in the 1930s, it seemed like the only sane choice? For leaders staring down the barrel of another world war, it was a massive gamble. So, was it a shameful mistake? Or a smart strategy to buy some desperately needed time? Let's get into it.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll dive into the world of fear that created this policy in the first place. Then we'll pin down what appeasement actually was, we'll look at the exact moment it all fell apart, put the policy on trial, and finally, try to understand why we're all still arguing about it today. To really get appeasement, you have to kind of time travel back to the 1930s. This wasn't a world of easy answers. It was a world completely haunted by the past and absolutely terrified of what was coming next.
I mean, just think about that question. That was the nightmare scenario facing leaders in Britain and France. The memory of World War I, the trenches, the gas, the millions and millions dead, it was still so fresh. Nobody, and I mean nobody, wanted to go through that horror again. But then this new threat, Hitler, is rising in Germany, and they had to figure out what to do.
So why not just stand up to him from day one? Well, it wasn't that simple. It was this perfect storm of problems. The fear of another war was just overwhelming. On a practical level, the military just wasn't ready for a big fight. The Great Depression had totally wrecked the economy, so there was no money for weapons. And the public, they were practically begging for peace. And on top of all of that, a lot of people in Britain actually felt a bit sorry for Germany. They thought the Treaty of Versailles after the First War had been way too harsh, so maybe, just maybe, some of Hitler's complaints were actually fair. Okay, so with all that in mind, the fear, the weakness, the public mood, what did this policy of appeasement actually look like when they put it into practice? Let's see how this whole idea played out. At its heart, the idea behind appeasement was pretty straightforward, if a little naive. The thinking went something like this. If we give Hitler what he says he wants, if we fix the parts of the Versailles Treaty that he says are unfair, then he'll calm down. He'll become a leader we can deal with, and we can all avoid another war. It was about giving in to hopefully get peace. And this is exactly how it unfolded, step by step. In 1936, Hitler marches his army into the Rhineland, which was a huge violation of the treaty. And the response from Britain and France? Crickets, nothing. Then, in 1938, he pulls off the Anschluss, basically annexing Austria. The response? A strongly worded letter, but no real action. And then you get to the big one, the Munich Agreement. Britain and France literally hand over a huge chunk of Czechoslovakia, the Sudetenland, to Hitler. And they didn't even invite the Czechs to the meeting. Each time, it was a gamble that this time would be the last time.
For a hot second after that Munich Agreement, the British Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, was treated like a rock star. He came home waving a piece of paper, promising peace for our time. But all that hope was built on a very, very shaky promise, and it was about to come crashing down hard. Now, what's so wild about this quote is the date, December 1938. This is before it all went wrong. It shows you that people were already seeing the huge, fatal flaw in the plan. Chamberlain was trying to make a rational deal with a guy who had an infinite appetite for power. He just didn't get who he was dealing with. And here it is, the moment the whole thing blew up in their faces. Just a few months after promising he was done, Hitler's armies roll into the rest of Czechoslovakia. This wasn't about uniting German-speaking people anymore. This was a straight-up invasion. He had lied, and appeasement was officially, publicly, a total failure. That was it. That was the final straw. The invasion of Czechoslovakia caused a complete 180. Britain and France drew a line in the sand. They made a promise, a guarantee, to Poland. If Hitler invaded them, it was war. No more deals, no more giving in. The policy of appeasement was over. So, with appeasement dead and war just around the corner, the debate started almost immediately. And it's a debate that's still raging today. Was it a cowardly mistake? Or was it actually a clever, if risky, strategy? Let's put it on trial and look at the evidence. The case for and against is just so complicated. On one side, people argue that Britain was desperate for time to build up its army, that the public couldn't stomach a war in 1938, and that the economy couldn't afford it. But the critics fire right back that giving in just made Hitler more aggressive, that it was a disgusting betrayal of Czechoslovakia, and that it just gave Germany more time to get even stronger, making the war that eventually came even worse. A lot of this debate really just boils down to one critical thing: time. The main argument for appeasement is that Chamberlain was just buying time, that he knew war was coming, but he needed to get Britain ready. But here's the kicker: just how weak was Britain really? Some historians argue that the intelligence reports Chamberlain was getting were wrong. They made Germany seem way stronger than it was. Maybe, just maybe, Britain was in a better position to fight in 1938 than he thought.
And this is where it gets really, really interesting. Look at this chart. In the mid-30s, Germany's way ahead in building planes. But watch what happens in 38 and especially in 39. British production just explodes. This right here is what that bought time actually looks like. It meant they could build the Spitfires and Hurricanes that were absolutely essential for winning the Battle of Britain. And it wasn't just about planes. It was about developing brand new tech, like radar, which gave them a massive advantage.
Okay, so if the data kind of shows that they used the time to rearm, why is this still such a hot topic? Why can't we just say, yup, it was justified and move on? Well, it's complicated for a few huge reasons. First, there's the massive problem of hindsight. It is so easy for us to sit here, knowing how the story ends, and judge their decisions. They didn't have that luxury. Second, there were no good options on the table. Chamberlain had to choose between a bad option and a possibly even worse one. And finally, you can't blame everything on appeasement. It was just one piece of a much larger puzzle of failures that led the world into war. And this quote from the historian Margaret Macmillan just nails it. World War II didn't pop up out of nowhere because of one bad policy. It was the end result of 2 decades of bad decisions, mischances, and simmering anger. So, there really is no easy answer here, is there? Was it a noble effort that failed? A necessary evil? Or just a massive miscalculation? The jury is still out. So I'll leave you with this question. Putting yourself in their shoes, with the information they had back then, not what we know now, what would you have done?